What are your beliefs surrounding yoga? Hey, all, welcome back to another thought provoking episode of What's on Your Plate podcast. I'm Sarah, your host, and joining me today is yoga instructor and Reiki Master Liz Smith. Today, we're talking about the many misconceptions surrounding yoga and breaking through the stereotypes that surround the important practice that is truly for everybody and every body. Let's hear it. I'm really excited to be here with Liz Smith today from Serendipity Yoga. She is the owner of that beautiful space in Homewood, Illinois. She entered the yoga world with the expectation of finding exercise that would cause her not to sweat. And soon learned that that was one of the many myths of yoga. And she is here today to share on even more of those. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm really grateful to be here today.
I'm so excited that we connected, and I love what you are bringing to the conversation today because I think there's a lot of misconception about yoga and who gets to do it, when they get to do it, where they get to do it. And I just love everything that we previously talked about. And now that we get to record it and share it, I'm really excited about that.
I'm excited to share it too, because I think that there are several things around fitness and well-being that are feel like they're almost gate kept, meaning that people feel like they don't belong in those spaces and it prevents them from exploring. And part of my mission over this last decade and a half has been to really help people understand that this is a practice for all of us, and it might look different. It might take place in different spaces, but it's something that can be done for free. It's something that you don't need any supplies for, and that you don't have to have a certain body type or body image to be able to achieve.
I love that so much because I do feel like there is a lot of assumption about yoga that you have to be able to like bend yourself into a pretzel, or that you have to be able to be a certain body type or be in certain spaces. And you have really made it part of your culture at your studio to make yoga incredibly accessible for everybody. I'd love to hear you talk more about that.
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, one of the most important things to acknowledge is that if you see me, I look like some people automatically assume that yoga is for. I look like that person. And so it's important to acknowledge that I am a white woman, and that is in the United States, at least, what has been the predominant market that yoga has been broadcast to historically. And quite possibly is exactly why I got into it. But what I've learned over the last decade and a half is that yoga is truly for everybody. And I have found that one of my greatest lessons in coming into all of this was one of my first clients was in her 80s when she started practicing with me, had been practicing yoga for decades already, but had this mindset that as long as she kept moving, that she was going to continue to be healthy. And I will tell you, she is 92 at this moment and is still extremely active in the ways that she can be. And it's changed and transformed over the last couple of decades, but she's there. And I've had such an honor of living in a community that is full of diversity. And when I speak to diversity, I want to make sure we include not only racial diversity, but also diversity in how we identify ourselves, diversity in who we love, diversity in socioeconomic status and language. And that's been a mission within the studio to be able to meet the needs of everyone, to tear down some of those ideals that, one of the biggest things body wise that people walk into the studio with or don't, because I'll run into people on the street and I have a very distinguishing haircut in that half my head is shaved. So I will walk down the street and people will be like, that's the yoga lady. I can't do yoga because I can't touch my toes. That's one of the first things that I love to dispel is that you don't have to touch your toes to partake in yoga. In fact, it's one of the least important things. And if you think about it, feet are kind of gross anyway. So why do you want to touch your toes? But truly, we wouldn't go into a piano lesson expecting to already know how to play a Bach symphony. And we wouldn't go into onto a golf course and expect ourselves to be able to get a hole in one. There are a lot of things in our lives where we've been conditioned to think that, oh, I can try this and I can practice. And if I enjoy it, I can get better at it. And in yoga and in a lot of ventures with our bodies, we are conditioned that if you don't know how to do it, well, then you just don't belong in that space. And that goes back for me. I remember being in physical education class as a kid, and it was either you knew how to climb the rope or you didn't know how to climb the rope. And no one ever actually taught you how to climb the rope. And so in yoga, I think one of the first things to know is that if you're coming into a space, whether it's on YouTube at home or in a yoga studio or in the park district, you have a guide there that's going to teach you to find ways to access things. And it might not look the same for everyone, but that's the role. That's why we're there. That's why we have all these YouTube channels and all of these studios, because we genuinely want people to come in and discover such cool things about their bodies.
I love that. Thank you for explaining so much about that. And it really makes a lot of sense to me in a different frame of mind of how it pertains to running. I'm a long distance runner. And one of the things people really get hung up with that as well is that you have to, for one, be a certain body type to do it. And also that it should look a certain way. And that's not true for that either. And I love that also pertains to yoga. And that it's for not just everybody, but everybody. And that's something I think people really just need to hear, because I think a lot of people would explore that space more if they didn't feel like it was so exclusive.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the hardest hurdles to overcome in all of these ventures, is that when you go into a space and you are the only, so doesn't matter what the only that you are, but if you are the only person who identifies as a man, or the only person that is a person of color, or the only person that weighs over a certain amount, it's very lonely and isolating, and it instantaneously gives the perception that you don't belong. And so something I've been so proud of our community for is that people show up. That's the first thing, is showing up. And you might be the only this time, but you never know if next time you won't be. And are you leading the way for other people to feel more comfortable? Um, and but a big piece of it is just recognizing for people that I see you, and you might be the only person here this time, but you won't be the only person. And how can we help make this practice more comfortable for you? For example, with certain body types, we might have somebody who's got a larger chest or a bigger belly, and that can feel uncomfortable, especially if you are not comfortable in your own body to start with. And so, how can we make that accessible? Well, in the yoga studio, we have a lot of props, and you can use things to lift the ground up to you, to make your arms a little longer or your legs a little bit shorter, or to make sure that your knee joints are padded appropriately. And initially, a lot of people will come in thinking that those props are a detriment or a cop out, or that oh man, you're not as good as somebody else if you use those. But what you really realize as you go through, and some of our most mentally advanced yogis are the ones that are using all of those props, because they realize that that's actually just what makes you feel better in your body. And so, who cares if your arms aren't longer than your legs? They're not supposed to be anyway. We would look kind of silly walking around with really long arms. And really short legs, that those props are there to support you in where you're at and to make things feel more accessible for you. Because ultimately, it's all about the individual person getting more connected to themselves in their body and mind and spirit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And when you're talking about the different props, I mean, I think of them as being tools to enhance what you're already trying to accomplish. I mean, you wouldn't be a baseball player and not use a bat or a mitt or a helmet, those are, or the ball, right? I mean, those are part of the practice of what you are participating in. And I don't see yoga props or tools as being anything different other than to help you achieve your best in what you're doing.
I love that perspective and I agree completely.
Can you take us back for a minute and help us get a visual of just the way that yoga truly, and maybe it still is this way in other parts of the world, but is truly just reserved for certain people, and how it is restricted to individuals and not accessible to others?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say that I am not a historian. So the history that I provide in the context here is a loose context that we're providing. But due to colonialism in the East, India is where yoga originated, and we've been able to narrow it down there. There's also a different style of yoga that originated in Africa. And so when we look at that, those origins, then we look at colonialism and the caste system that was put on people. Yoga was reserved for specific castes or groups of individuals. And so in India, for example, historically, only men in a certain group of men were allowed to practice yoga. And those practices were originally intended to be kept secret. But what happens with all good secrets that hold power is that people want to share them because there is such a power in the practice. And so in 1893, the actually in Chicago was where they first, our first documented occurrence of yoga happened in the United States was at the World's Fair in Chicago. I believe the same year the Ferris wheel was premiered. So yoga was brought here in 1893, and the people here in the West at the World's Fair really, and in Europe, recognized that there was something to this practice. And without going into so much of the history, but over decades, over the last century plus, the practices of yoga were slowly brought to the United States. And now we went from a practice that was reserved for a specific caste of men from India. And somewhere along the line, it got turned into, especially in Europe and in the United States, into a practice that was for skinny, white women who had a lot of money and could afford to go to a yoga studio and take time out of their days to practice. I would say that if I had to make a best guess, around the 1980s would be when that would be really a thing that started to come about. Prior to that, we had a lot of people traveling to India, even the Beatles, traveling to India, finding a guru and working with their teacher to learn the ways of yoga and to discover enlightenment and find worldviews. Now, here over the last, I would say, since the I would say really since COVID, more than anything, people have started to find the freedom to go on YouTube and dabble, if you will, in yoga and turn on a video and see what works. Even before that, there people, individuals have been trying to pave the way for a more inclusive look at yoga. Diamond Dallas Page, who's a wrestler, has yoga videos, or like the stereotypical macho man to get in and try some yoga. But we've really seen since this the world was forced to go online, people have started to put more yoga practices and onto the internet. And that allows people to explore not only the physical aspects of yoga, because we do have the movement, the posture, which for most people who are brand new to the practice, that's where their brain goes. They're like, oh, I have to move in a certain way, but also the wider availability of the other aspects of yoga too, because it's not just movement, it's about breath control. And it doesn't matter who you are, if you're alive, you can control your breath with practice. There's the meditative piece of yoga. And a lot of times we think there's yoga and meditation separate. And really, meditation is an aspect of yoga. And so when we sit and meditate, we are practicing yoga. And so all of these aspects are really starting to become more widely available. And there's the shift around mental health awareness that also historically was gate kept for white people. And we're starting to see that this shift in mental health and well-being, this shift towards connecting more deeply to our spirit, this shift to connecting more to each other is not reserved for one group of people, but this goes across for everybody. And so, it doesn't matter how you gender identify, who you love, what your background is ethnically or racially. We're starting to see more and more people walking into a studio, getting into a gym, turning on YouTube, and also seeing more teachers represent themselves so that you're not the only one. All different body types are being represented on social media, practicing the physical aspects and some of those more deeper, subtle aspects of yoga.
Yeah, I love that. And I really love just your honesty about how you absolutely are the stereotype and how you're working so hard to make yoga more accessible for those that are not that typical stereotype. And it is so important for people to have access to something like yoga because it is something different for everybody in so many ways. For some people, it is a way to allow for movement and exercise, but for other people, it is mental health. And there's so many other things in between, like you just described. So not being a gatekeeper, I think, is something that is so important in what you do and what you offer the community.
Thank you. And I give so much recognition to all of the people who are just so brave to step into an unfamiliar space, because that's the biggest thing, is that it takes courage to get out there and try something new, whatever it is. And it takes courage to break the mold and to do the things that not everybody's doing. But once you've made that first step, it hopefully becomes easier to take the next step and the next step and to go back to running. It's that first, the first minute, the first mile, the first 5 miles, whatever your limit is, that's the hardest part. Once you're doing it, you realize how good that it has the potential to make you feel. And in terms of wellness, we are wired to want to do all of the right things. But a lot of the hard things to do, we don't get immediate rewards or benefits from. And so it's a lot easier to pick up the piece of chocolate cake and eat that because it's going to make us feel good in the moment, forget the consequences later. But it's a lot harder to make the choice that long term is going to make us feel well. And I'm seeing more and more people recognizing that and wanting to feel a certain way and realizing that it might take a little bit of work and some courage and some bravery and several deep breaths, but it'll be worth it.
Yes. And, I feel like knowing that consistency, whether it's yoga or running or anything else, is going to be part of what you need in order to see results from anything that you start, right? Knowing that has to be a thing. how do you help people just get from that starting point to that point where they are able to, even if they're not seeing something physically different, they're feeling something physically different and getting past that initial uncomfortable feeling of doing something entirely different? How do you help them get there?
Think that it's all about baby steps because a lot of us have a mindset that, okay, I'm going to start this new habit and I am going I'm going to go 5 days a week. I'm going to make sure that this happens perfectly every single time. And then life gets in the way. Your kid gets sick or cries, or, you don't feel well, or it was just a long day. And then we are off the wagon, if you will. We've missed something and we quit because why let myself down? Right. And so when I'm working with new clients, we really work together to set a goal. What do you ideally want to be feeling? And how often should we be working together? And that's going to look different for every single person. And what life circumstances are in the way. And for a lot of people, it becomes as simple to practice yoga. Can you just stop right now, take a deep breath in and out, and actually just feel what it was like to breathe? Because that is yoga. You've now brought energy into your body, you've released something that you don't need, and you have a moment to change how you're feeling. Could you balance on one foot while you wash the dishes, holding onto the counter so you don't fall over? Well, that's a practice of yoga posture. So, starting small, 2 minutes a day, 30 seconds, one breath. And if you can get yourself onto your mat for a longer amount of time, fantastic. And anyone who's worked with a YouTube video at home and has pets or children, you will know they will always want to be around you when you're doing it. And so the cats will climb on your back and the dogs will crawl under you and lick your face. And the children will, of course, need you. But to do it and get yourself into that space is that's the important part. So baby steps, 30 seconds. And if you're going to a studio, I always say, like, get yourself here once a week. That's a great place to start. And if you end up having time and space to get there more, fantastic. And if not, it's okay. And if you miss a week, we'll send you an email to tell you we love you and that we miss you. But also, it's okay because life happens. But taking moments to be mindful, taking time to breathe, slowing down, that's really what it comes to. It's not about perfection, it's all about progress.
Yes. And I think it's so important to acknowledge just taking that time to pause and to breathe and getting out of that grind of life. It's so hard for many of us, right? I don't know if it's easier for someone like you who is living yoga day in and day out. I imagine you get absorbed in the business aspect of things, and it's not just all yoga all day, right? So even people like yourself, I would imagine, need to be reminded to just pause and to step back and to breathe and to just take that time for themselves.
Absolutely. It's all about, so we're all humans. Yoga teachers, humans, so fallible. It just so happens that we stumbled upon something that gave us a bunch of tools and resources to help us, when we stumble, get up a little bit faster. Right? I lose my temper. I have really stressful days. My husband constantly jokes with me that I should not be allowed to manage my own calendar because I overbook every chance that I get. Um, but when push comes to shove, when I need a minute, I can recognize I need a minute, and I have a variety of ways to step into my body, to breathe, and to just sink into my thoughts for a moment, to recover and rebound more quickly. And again, those tools are not just for any one person. We have, at the studio, we do yoga classes for infants. We have classes for
Mm.
0 to 12 months old.
Wow.
And We get those little, so we do prenatal in utero yoga. They come out and we get mom back on the mat, dad on the mat, whoever is on the mat, caregiver, and moving with the baby, moving the baby right away. And this goes all the way through, and it's going to look different. A 2-year-old is not going to look the same in a movement practice than a 5-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 70-year-old. But we all can move and play. We work with groups of adults that have special needs. Just had a group in the studio this week, and yeah, that's going to look so different than working with a group of football players. It's all relative. It's all going to look different, but we can all do it. And the power is there. We can just look at the history of sports teams. Chicago Bulls started winning when Phil Jackson hired them a meditation coach. The Chicago Cubs started winning when they practiced yoga every single day. The year they won the World Series, the year before that, they started practicing yoga daily. It shifts your mindset, it shifts how your body is, and doesn't doesn't matter how old you are, what you look like, or who you think you are. You absolutely have access to it.
That's amazing. Just all of that you shared in regards to even professional sports teams who people would assume are just like out on the field or on the court, just doing the drills and doing the workouts. They also benefit significantly from stepping back and slowing down and being more mindful. And it truly is something that all walks of life are benefiting from. And I love how you're creating so much awareness of that. And I think it's so important that it's just getting more and more out there into the communities that this is something for everybody on all levels, on all abilities. And I love that you're including infants that I've not heard of that specific branch of yoga before. I know that there is children's yoga and that, but really from from point A to point B, from start to finish, from beginning to end, yoga is truly for everybody. It's like one of the only things that, in terms of movements, that can be true with.
Absolutely. And the greatest part is, and we talked about props earlier, but you don't have to use any props. You don't have to have a yoga mat. You don't need to have a meditation room. You can do this anywhere. And that comes in to getting out in the community. We do a lot of work out of the studio to help people recognize that this can happen anywhere. It can happen in a park. It can happen in a community center. It can happen in a firehouse, in a police department, in a prison. I mean, it really can translate anywhere and everywhere. And it is truly an inclusive practice as long as we, again, work really hard as teachers of yoga, as practitioners of yoga to make it so.
One of the local yogis in my area, she spoke about how she started her path with teaching yoga at the local prison and how she just saw such a difference in the mindset and energy of the people she was serving. And people just couldn't wait to get in that class and to get in that energy and within those movements. And it made such a difference in the mental health of those particular people. It was just unquestionably beneficial. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but would you say that the way that we are able to shift our mindset and mentality is the one of the ways that most people experience benefits from yoga?
Absolutely. So most of us, if we think about our nervous systems, we have, two general modes. There's your fight, flight, or freeze. Most of us have heard about that. And then we have our rest and digest mode. And many of us spend our time in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. We're dysregulated. And a lot of times we, you know, are in a space feeling like we're in danger, and we're not. Sometimes we truly are, but sometimes we're not. For example, there's a big difference between standing in the middle of the street and nearly getting, hit by a car versus the stress that we impose upon ourselves at work to meet deadlines. However, our nervous system doesn't distinguish between those two. You're either on or you're off. You're stressed or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us just spend all the time stressed and then asleep. It's not that we even brought ourselves to regulation. It's just that we're awake and stressed out. We're awake, fight, flight, or freeze, and I'm so tired, sleep. And then we turn back on again. And what yoga allows us to do is it gives us resources and tools, whether it's physical movements or conscious breathing or these progressive relaxation techniques or learned meditation. And it allows us to learn how to regulate our nervous system. And so when we dysregulate, we can decide, okay, is this justified? Well, yes, if I am in a dangerous situation, this is what I need to be feeling. Or am I perceiving a dangerous situation? And can I use a tool, pick from the many that yoga gives me to put myself back into a state of rest, of being able to process what's happening around me in a healthy way? And so when we talk about working in a prison system, there's a lot of, as I understand and make assumptions based on pop culture, that there's a lot of dysregulation that would happen in the day to day. But then in those moments of safety, can I put myself back into a space of rest? Or for those of us that are running around, we have kids to take care of, we have responsibilities, we have jobs. Can I take a moment to put myself back into a state of relaxation without relying on some of the other things that we do? Netflix, and trust me, I love video games, I love Netflix, but can we get there without that? Can we find true relaxation so the brain can slow down and re-regulate?
Right. Finding it within ourselves instead of reaching for something outside in order to help us protect ourselves is so very important. And for me, that would absolutely be one of the most beneficial things about yoga. When I first tried yoga, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, I entered that space for the absolute wrong reasons. I thought that I was going to be cross training and stretching in a way that would help me become a better runner. And I didn't connect with it that way. I wasn't able to embrace it. It was only years later when I came back into yoga with a different mindset of more of that calming awareness, that grounding type of need, that yoga became something for me that was kind of a non-negotiable, and something that I knew I could reach for anytime I was feeling just a bit unhinged or out of sorts.
I mean, that's the thing. I encourage everyone to try yoga, but also know there are a few things. One, not every teacher is going to resonate with you. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a great life lesson in general, is that not everybody's going to like you, and you can't make everybody like you, and you're not going to like everybody. And so I strongly encourage people to stick around on YouTube, or if you're at a studio, try different teachers and find something that really resonates with you. The second thing is that there are many different styles of yoga. And so for someone who came in how you originally came in,
Mm-hmm.
there's a style of yoga called vinyasa, which is it's going to meet your need of stretch and move, some cross training and some cardiovascular enhancement, and that, which is great. But if you come into yoga expecting to lay and relax and breathe, and you stumble into a vinyasa class accidentally, oh man, that's not what
Yeah.
you expected. Same thing if you wanted to be stimulated, if you need to move, going to a style of yoga called restorative is going to feel like torture. I actually have a client who calls restorative yoga torture yoga, because client's brain is so active and so stimulated that being asked to lay still is a horrible experience.
Mhm.
So I we need to feel free to experiment with teachers and also be empowered with the knowledge that there are a lot of different styles out there, and it's good to try different things and not feel like this is just the one and done. And especially because not all medical professionals understand that there's different kinds of yoga.
Mhm.
Medical professionals will often just say, go to yoga. And then you go to
Yeah.
a yoga class or you look at a schedule and you're like, what is happening? I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. So it's a bit of trial and error. One of my favorite questions to ask people when they call and ask about yoga or email is just like, well, what do you want from this practice? Because then I can better match you to what you're looking for if I know what you're looking for. But otherwise, you might end up in the wrong spot and just try again.
Well, and I love that you do that with your clients. And that is a big difference between reaching out to somebody like yourself and going to say the why. And not to discredit the why, I've gone there and their classes, again, depending on whether you connect with the instructor can be hit or miss for the individual. But when you are actually asking somebody, what do you want to gain from this experience? What are you hoping for by giving yoga a try? I mean, the way that you can individualize people's experiences is so important. And I got to believe that that absolutely increases the diversity and the accessibility to people in your community.
I hope that's the case too, because that's ultimately what we're really trying to provide is a service to help people get in touch with their bodies, to feel
Mm.
more comfortable with their brains, because we spend a lot of time trying to escape our own thoughts. And so by meeting people where they're at and helping them grow from there, I really truly hope that that is bringing a sense of comfort and ease to as many people as we can, and then help them to expand and grow.
I have no doubt that it is. How do you best reach out to your community in order to help them know that that's the type of experience that you offer and that they can find solutions to any way that they're looking into yoga by reaching out to your specific studio?
So we spend a lot of time out in the community. So we work with different public works departments, different service providers within the community. I partner with both of our villages. So we live in it's Homewood-Flossmoor. And so they're separate villages, but they are combined. And so do a lot of work with them, work with our schools and help the schools recognize that there are a lot of benefits of yoga for their staff as well as for children. Uh, and just being willing to hang around after formal events and answer questions and go in and provide little accessible bites to people. Do a lot of work with not-for-profits locally to bring yoga to their patrons and to their staffs as well, because working for a not-for-profit can be a very stressful job at times. Uh, so I think bringing yoga to the people as opposed to expecting them just to come in makes a big difference. And then we bring them back in. Then
Yeah.
we've got our audience. We're like, all right, come on in. We work with our local libraries, and it's been great to just see the reception of the community and to really recognize that we can do this anywhere. It does not have to be in a yoga studio.
I love that so much. I think that is something so important that you're doing that is different than other places where somebody might go for yoga or have a yoga experience, is that you are you are out in the community. And that is something that, you might occasionally see like yoga in the park or something like that, but not in the same way that you're doing it in terms of like you say, going to schools or going to nonprofits or other places where you're helping people really embrace yoga, and you're going to them to help them understand that you're not like waiting for them to be brave enough to come to you. And I think that's a lot. There's a lot to be said about that, is people are scared to try something that they never have before.
Exactly. And especially something that feels, call it what you will, but new age or hippie-ish, or, there's all the different words for it. And it's not new age or hippie-ish. It's existed for thousands of years
Right.
and is truly an experience, a holistic experience. But when we put the stigma on it, it again feels like it only belongs in certain places. And especially depending on how, just generationally, where you are, you have different experiences. I know I always laugh at my parents because they, they were growing up in the 60s, they were in college in the 60s. And I just remember when I was little, they were huge Beatles fans, but only pre India, because the Beatles got weird as soon as they went to India and
That's funny.
And it always, but it even like brings me back to being like, I would listen to that music as a kid, and I always go red album, blue album. And for anybody listening, if you know, you know. But like, if I could listen to the blue album, which was all post travels to India, it always drew me in so much more in a way than their early pop evolution. And but, speaking to my parents who are in their 60s about yoga is a very different experience than talking to, somebody in the Gen Alpha, who are 12 years old at this point, and they recognize like, oh no, I need to take care of my mental health. And I need to make sure that I take mental health days, and that I am not feeling stressed out, which is very different from talking to someone who's a millennial who,
Right.
if you lay down and relax, you get in trouble. Don't you relax. That's being lazy.
Isn't that
So
amazing, the difference in that mindset? And I'm so glad it's shifting. And no doubt yoga has been a huge catalyst in that regard. So it's just more affirmation that what you are doing every day to help people just connect with themselves is so important. It is so very important. And I just love what you're doing.
I really appreciate that. And I feel so grateful that I get to do it, because I honestly love what I get to do too, and have such an amazing team, because to do all the work that we do, I can't do it alone. So have such a great team at the studio that are able to help us be able to reach larger, broader swaths of the community, and such a diverse team. We have, yeah, people of varied generations and varied backgrounds themselves, varied body types, because we need to see that it is for everybody.
I love that so much. Liz, what do you want to say? What else would you like to share about just people understanding that yoga is very accessible if they want it to be? It is very approachable. It is very inclusive to all. What else would you like to share about that?
Just wanted to recognize too that we all carry our own traumas. You could go with the big like capital T, lowercase t, but it doesn't matter. We all have it, and the nervous system recognizes and it in all the same way. It's processed in the same way. And so we all have those things, and it can make trying something new scary, and it can make trying something new feel very uncomfortable. But science shows, as well as thousands of years of anecdotal evidence shows, that when we take the time to connect to our bodies, to breathe deeply, and to really slow down the rapid fire processes of our brain, we are healthier, and we are happier, and we feel like we have more control over our lives. And so I want everyone listening to take that risk, take that chance on yourself, to take a deep breath, See what it feels like to sit for 30 seconds and just notice what you're thinking about. Because meditation is not emptying your brain. We would need a whole other episode on it. But meditation is not emptying your brain. Meditation is getting comfortable sitting with your brain and all the stuff in your brain. Uh, so take that risk. And when you're ready, walk through the door of your nearest yoga studio or turn on that YouTube video and just try. And whatever your body gives you in that moment, let it give you. And if your arms don't move in the way you want them to or at all, then you just don't do the arm movements. And we can really adjust, adapt, and accommodate.
I love that. Just allowing yourself so much grace and yeah, just allowing grace and giving yourself permission to not be perfect is amazing.
And there are a lot of perfectionists out there. And the grace piece is one of the biggest things.
Yeah. Liz, I've loved this conversation. Tell everybody where we can find you and how they can stay connected.
Absolutely. So one of the easiest ways to find us is on social media. We're at Serendipity Yoga and Wellness, and spelling serendipity is always an adventure. Our website is also serendipityyogaandwellness.com. And you can feel free to find us if you live in and around Homewood. We do have classes in studio and all around the community. We also do online classes as well. And so those are broadcast through our website, and you can register for those classes there. We have a limited YouTube library, but we're also on YouTube at Serendipity Yoga and Wellness. So I like to know my people though, so I hold everybody really close and don't put it out on YouTube too often.
That's
Because
understandable.
I love all the people. I just love knowing everybody and being able to connect personally and interpersonally.
Absolutely. I love the personal touch that you put on everything that you do. It definitely shows. And I feel that even just in this virtual conversation we're having today, that you absolutely connect with your clients and meet them where they're at and are on the journey with them. And that's amazing. Thank you just endlessly for everything you shared. And of course, for our listeners, always to stay connected and explore yoga with Liz will be in the show notes, just a click away. So thank you, Liz, for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's truly been a pleasure to be here with you too, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen in to the many conversations that are shared in this space. And thank you to today's guest, Liz. Thank you for bringing light to the topic of inclusion, diversity, and accessibility in yoga. This has been an important discussion that I believe will help people see yoga through a new, more clear lens and help them find their way to starting their own journey with the practice of yoga and meditation. If you've loved this episode, if you've gained something from it, please do share it. Take the time to like it, review, or rate it. The best and most important thing you can do to keep these conversations flowing is to subscribe to the podcast. It helps you because you'll never miss an episode. And it helps me because, well, you'll never miss an episode. So much love and appreciation to you. Thank you for supporting what I do and being in this space. Until next time.